Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB
and LB.
We'll be breaking down some of our favorite movies and TV shows as they relate to mental health, self-healing, and overall wellness, while also breaking stigmas, shedding light on misinterpretations, and helping you understand yourself a little better.
If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mental Health Multiverse. Today, we are talking about Alice from Alice in Wonderland. And I'm so excited for this conversation because we are also joined by an amazing guest. You may remember her from our Cinderella episode, but please welcome Chloe. Woo, 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 woo.
Yay, thank you.
Yeah, we are discussing this, but we think you're our first time returning guest. So congratulations. That's very exciting.
Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, so exciting. I mean, I definitely wanted to have you on for Cinderella. So if y'all have not listened, we have some hot takes in our Cinderella episode about that movie, and it's really funny too because you're coming back for another classic. Alice in Wonderland came out in 1951. So back for another classic. So you must just have a thing for the classic prince. Well, I guess Alice isn't a princess, but like the classic Disney ladies.
Something about a blonde in blue. I don't know.
Yeah. But for everyone who doesn't know or hasn't listened to our Cinderella episode yet, I met Chloe. This is HB, Heather talking. I met Chloe through the cosplay community. She comes from Albany, New York, and has been a lifelong Disney princess fanatic. She's been cosplaying for 7 years and working as a professional princess and character performer for 4. In October of 2022, she opened her own business, Fantasy First Character Entertainment, which just celebrated their 1-year businessversary. So congratulations. And this provides character performances for events of all sizes and audiences of all ages. Fantasy First has a variety of characters, but their most popular and most booked are the Disney princesses. So Chloe, welcome back. We're so excited to have you.
Yay, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back.
But yeah, I knew that Alice was one of your other favorites. I think I see because we connected on Instagram, I see you post that like little picture of you as a child dressed as Alice, being like, hello, this is proof I have loved her since I was a child. Thank you very much. Like I'd rather be her than Elsa any day. So yes, welcome. And as a welcome to you coming back, I'm going to ask you to give us an abridged synopsis of Alice in Wonderland.
1951. Okay. Sorry, there's just so many different ones.
And we can talk about all of them because I've only seen the live action once. And then I just watched the animated from 1951 for the first time since I was probably a kid last night. I didn't realize there were so many more, but if there are obviously overlap and some relevant topics, please bring them in. I'm so curious. I'm actually really excited for this conversation because we'll probably get into it more, but I feel like I don't know. I am here to be a little bit more educated and to hear from a person that loves Alice in Wonderland. Not that I don't love it. I just am having kind of a hard time relating it to some like mental health journeys. So anyway.
Yeah.
Marissa.
I was
I
thinking
know,
about
for the first time in forever.
I was thinking about that too before I came on here, which we can get into later, but I don't think it's really, I think this has been my favorite story since I was little. And I think, like Heather said earlier, I don't remember if it was on the recording or before we started, that the story just lends itself to such rich storytelling, like the lore of the original books. It's 2 books. A lot of people don't know that. It's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and then right after that is Through the Looking Glass. And a lot of the film and cartoon adaptations are, sometimes an amalgamation of the 2 or sometimes 2 separate things. So there's just like so much to explore, and it's been retold in so many fun and exciting ways. And it's just, like I said, the world building and like the lore and everything is just so expansive that it's just really cool to see different artistic interpretations of it. But as far as 1951, so it starts out Alice and her sister, who is unnamed, are by the they're like by a bank by a pond, and she's trying to like read her like history lessons or whatever, and Alice is just so painfully bored, because who wants to go play outside and listen to your sister read in some monotone voice about history, you know? So she's sitting there and she's daydreaming, and she's up in the tree, and she's got her cat Dinah, and she's like starts like, you know, daydreaming and fantasizing about what it would be like to be in this world of her own creation, where she didn't have to listen to history lessons, and she could do whatever she wanted, and silly things would happen, like flowers would talk and cats would be wearing hats and trousers, and she sings the song. And as she starts daydreaming is when she first sees the White Rabbit, who of course runs by with his pocket watch and his waistcoat, and he says, "I'm late, I'm late." And she's like, that's weird. This seems more interesting than whatever my sister's talking about, so I'm gonna go follow him. So she follows the White Rabbit down through the rabbit hole. She falls through the rabbit hole and winds up in Wonderland. I could like, if I'm giving a synopsis, I could like describe every single little, I'll keep it tight. She follows the White Rabbit into Wonderland, and along the way she meets this ensemble of very silly, kooky, upside down, all these different kinds of creatures and characters, who are all kind of like, they're not very nice to her, which is something I've explored with my cast when we've done like performances and things like that. But yeah, Alice kind of shows up in Wonderland and everyone's just kind of like rude. Like she doesn't have a great time. So you know, she meets the Tweedles, she meets the Cheshire Cat, the Mad Hatter, the March Hare, the Dodo, and the flowers, which is my favorite part. I'm wearing my it says, "Do you suppose she's a wildflower?"
Oh, that's cute.
I have to wear my thematic t-shirt.
I love it.
But yeah, so she goes through all these like very nonsensical kind of scenes where all these like just strange things are happening, and along the way she's like, man, I kind of like don't want to be here, like this is kind of crazy, I wish that I could go home. But of course there is no way for her to get home. And the Cheshire Cat is like, well, maybe the Queen of Hearts can help you. And so he leads her to the Queen of Hearts, who is this tyrant, this just over the top, larger than life character, who is apparently the matriarch of all of Wonderland. The governmental structure is very unclear. I don't know if she just like named herself as the queen, but she's got this whole army of playing cards and her little husband, the king. And
So precious.
huh?
I said so precious.
He's like this big. He has like
He's
one
so
line.
tiny.
It's just so silly. But yeah, she meets the queen, who is obviously also not nice to her. Tries to make a fool out of her because Alice is like good at croquet, and it makes the queen look silly in front of her subjects. So the queen decides to, in turn, make Alice look bad. And then the painting the roses red thing, she has this obsession with red roses, and she's having the cards paint the roses red. But when she realized, or no, the cards decided on their own that they were going to paint them. Because they planted the white roses by mistake, and the queen likes the red roses. And Alice is found consorting with them, because when she first gets to the Queen of Hearts' garden, that's who she first talks to. This is leading up to the trial. I'm like, I can't remember. I think it's because the queen finds out that the roses were being painted and they weren't planted the correct color in the first place. The queen's like, we're gonna hold trial because why not? Because I'm the judge, the jury, and the executioner here. So she like brings up basically the whole cast of characters that Alice has come across throughout her journey through Wonderland for this like very silly, ridiculous trial. And eventually it's found that Alice is guilty and it is to be off with her head. But Alice is like, no. So she runs away, and she's being chased through this maze in the garden by all the cards and all the rest of the characters. And then all of a sudden, everything just kind of starts to go kind of fuzzy, and she hears her sister's voice, Alice, Alice, wake up. And come to find out, she had been dozing against the tree for the entire time. Now, this is really funny. I learned this through like my second wave of getting back into this story when I was like hitting puberty. I learned that when the studio was first making this movie, they ran out of funding at the end, because when you think about it, it is a very abrupt ending to what could have been, you know, the story. Like if you think about it, it could have gone on. It seems a very silly place to just abruptly end it, be like, she was asleep the whole time. So the studio did run out of funding, and they were forced to end it at that point. This particular adaptation is a mixture of both Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. It features characters and certain events from both of them. And yeah, it was supposed to go on longer, but the studio didn't have the money to continue it, so they were just like, and then she wakes up, the end. So
Whoa.
yeah.
I didn't know
Yeah, I
that.
didn't know that.
I think
Huh.
that's it.
How does it wrap up in the books? Do you know?
It's been a while. I own like 20 copies of the books. The Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, I'm pretty sure she wakes up again, but I don't remember what like the final events are that lead up to that.
Okay.
Like it's not as
I was just
abrupt as it
curious.
is in the cartoon. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in the books, it is all a dream as well, though.
Yes. Yes. In Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and then Through the Looking Glass is like a separate thing.
Okay. The end of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland includes one additional scene. After Alex wakes up, she tells her adventures to her sister. Alice herself runs off gleefully, and for a moment, the reader is left alone with the sister, recalling all the strange characters and weird happenings of Wonderland.
Okay.
Apparently.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
And that is from a source called Schmoop. So I don't know.
Seems legit.
I don't. Seems
Super
legit. Yeah.
Totally.
Super legit. Thanks, Schmoop.
I didn't realize that was her sister. I thought that was her mom.
Either. Yeah.
It's her older sister.
I had no idea.
Well,
thank you for that. Both educational and entertaining.
Yeah. When I was watching it last night, I was texting some friends, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little not sober while watching this, and I was like, what on earth is happening right now? Because I have a friend who's a huge like Ghibli fan, and I was telling her it was like creeping me out in the way that Ghibli movies do, like Miyazaki films do, especially Spirited Away, because it's very like it does feel like a nightmarish dream sequence where it's just like this thing is happening and this thing is happening, but then also she has like no control over what's happening, and things are just kind of happening to and around her, and she just kind of has to like go with it. And my friend was like, yeah, I mean, basically the plot is like, what would a little girl dream about if we gave her acid?
Yes.
I mean, that's what it felt like. But
truly.
But
I feel
yeah,
like
so
a lot of the older Disney movies were like, because like the beginning of Snow White is freaking weird too. So it's like, was everyone on drugs?
Yeah,
or they were like
it's in the soda. Like
that's true.
It's easier to come by.
But also like I think that there's also something to be said about the fact that like animation was relatively new. I mean, maybe not at this point, but like they wanted to see what they could do with it, maybe also be like, we can we can get as weird as we want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the whole like walrus scene eating the baby oysters, I was so traumatized. I think I have a note in there while I was watching. I was like, he's eating the babies.
Yeah.
But that whole story, that whole sequence really just seemed to me like Disney trying to show off their animation, honestly. But that could also just be, how movies and plots moved back then, was that it was a little, I don't know.
A lot of it was Disney trying to be like, it was like Walt Disney, knew the story, and he was like, you could go crazy with animation on this one. And that was like, I think that was one of the main motives to make this film, is they wanted to see what they could do, because it is so whimsical and over the top and just so silly and crazy that, yeah, for sure.
I think and also
like they did nail it, but also all of the little things have a moral to them. Like they're all little like lessons that she learns on her adventure, and whether or not she chooses to believe or accept those lessons, which is why I'm finding it hard to believe that you couldn't find any mental health stuff, because it's like it's just a series of lesson after lesson for her. Like the beginning is sort of like they're literally defining curiosity killed the cat. They're like, listen, don't do this because you're gonna die, is essentially what they say. Like look at what happened to the oysters, and she's like, that only applies if you're an oyster though, I'm not. And then it just like keeps going. But yeah, I think that like throughout the whole thing, even though it's all nonsensical, which she does say at the beginning when she's bored and her sister is
Right.
reading to her, she's like, in my world, everything would be nonsense. And then she goes to a world where everything is nonsense and realizes like,
She's like,
that's
never
not a
mind.
world
Yeah.
I want to live in. Yeah. She's like, I actually don't like this at all.
How old
So,
is
like,
she supposed to be?
7.
7?
Okay, so it's not in the cartoon, it's not canonical. When Lewis Carroll wrote the book, it was about his friend's daughter, which is like,
Yeah.
I think she was literally like 4 at the time. I don't know where did I just come up with 7? I got that from somewhere in the recesses of my brain, but yeah, she's very young.
I believe you. Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah, it says 7. I just Googled it. Wikipedia says 7. Yeah.
I think she feels older because whenever I hear a transatlantic accent, they just always seem so much older and prim and proper. And so I thought she was like at least 11, 12.
Yeah. I mean, kids can be really nonsensical too. Like they might not have to be on acid to think up these kinds of things. As someone who works with children and the weird stuff that I hear them say, I'm like, where did that possibly come from?
You are not wrong. You're not wrong.
It's funny because in the beginning, she's complaining about how books and texts and learning about history and lessons are so boring, and she wants things to be nonsense and she wants everything to be opposite. And once she gets thrown into this situation and she's meeting all these characters that are totally nonsensical, is when she reverts back to her like very rational, like how you can assume a logical, like how you would assume her sister probably wants her to react, like when she's arguing with the flowers. So she's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about? No, that doesn't. She reverts back to that very black and white, yes or no, rational, logical kind of mindset.
That's true. That's a good point.
So Chloe, since this is your favorite and you've loved it since you were a kid, tell us about some of your first experiences with it, loving it as a kid. Like, what do you think got you into it? Why do you think you liked it? Do you remember seeing it when you were little and how different it feels now?
Yeah, I remember I was like literally like 4 or 5. I think it's like one of my earliest memories, and I remember the first time I watched it was probably at my grandparents' house, and I just fell in love with it. I don't know, when you're that young, I think it's just really just visual, like it's bright colors and everything is silly and flowers that talk, and I love cats. I always Dinah and Cheshire Cat is a huge part of it. I've always loved cats. And Alice's design...
interrupt you, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Some news for LB is like finally we get pro cat propaganda, because we get negative cat propaganda in Cinderella and some other Disney movies. So this is our pro cat Disney film.
Dinah is pro cat, but balanced out by the Cheshire Cat, who is very much like
I guess that's true.
Anti-cat.
He's very I wouldn't say like anti-cat, just very
It's very cat behavior. If cats could talk, they'd be the Cheshire Cat. Come on. Some of them would.
Yeah.
Some of them.
My cat would think she was like the Cheshire Cat, but like wouldn't be like as like suave.
Yeah.
He would like think that that's what he like sounded like. But
like,
yeah,
everyone's mad here.
Literally, yeah. Okay, Peach. I love Alice's design. Like there's something just like so classic and elegant about it, with the hair tied back and the pinafore, and like when she like goes down the rabbit hole and it like poofs up around her and she's like floating, and like the clean white stockings and the little classic little shoes. It's just, there's just something so simple and elegant about it that I always just loved since I was little.
She is very cute.
Yeah, she is very cute, and I did like her the animation, especially of her dress when she's falling and it puffs out like a little umbrella. And then when she's like really really big, and her like when she starts crying and stuff, I thought that was really funny. But throughout the entire movie I was like, girl, stop eating random things. She was like, oh, look at these mushrooms. I'm like, no. Don't eat the mushrooms. Don't drink the weird possible poison. And it's funny because she like says that to herself. She's like, it's very good advice to not drink poison. And I'm like, but you're gonna drink it anyway. Okay. She is very funny. Yes. HB, what about you?
So what about me? I liked this movie as a kid, but I also thought it was boring. I think there are parts of me that were bored by it. And also parts that were scary. I was afraid of things. I don't remember what, but I remember being afraid of some of the things. I think I was afraid of the doorknob talking, just like random stuff that's like really some of the really weird stuff.
It's all just very disconcerting, like slightly
yeah,
unsettling, like the
yeah,
entire time. So that's totally
yeah,
totally valid.
yeah,
just like a weird dream that you're having that you can't really like wake up from or shake, and like weird things are happening and you just kind of have to like go with it. But it surprises me to hear that, Heather, because you like really weird, creepy things. So like,
yeah, I know. This is like creepy in a different way. Yeah, this is
Okay.
this is like glass doll creepy versus like running through the woods creepy, if that makes sense. So
sure. Yeah.
But I liked it a lot. I think I watched it a lot. My family and I always call a little sliver crescent moon the Cheshire Cat moon. Like when the moon looks like the Cheshire Cat is smiling, we always call it that. We'd be like, "Oh, look, it's a Cheshire Cat moon." And I recently forced the kids that I babysit to watch this movie, and they hated it.
No.
I felt so because okay, I bought them the game, the game Villainous, so like the Disney game Villainous, and the Queen of Hearts is one of the villains in Villainous, and they didn't know who she was.
She's
And I was
so
like,
hard to play. Sorry. Okay, continue.
no, she's relatively easy. I think she's easy. I'll play you. We'll play each other next time we're together.
I'll play as Maleficent because I dominate with Maleficent. Let's go.
I dominate with the Queen of Hearts. So, but anyway, they didn't know who she was. And I was like, y'all need some education on who the Queen of Hearts is. And then they watched it and they reported back to me because I didn't watch it with them. And they reported back to me and they were like, Heather, that was the most boring movie we've ever watched. And I was like, I can't believe it.
Maybe
but at
if
the
they
same
had
time,
slipped
I'm like,
some cough syrup beforehand, they would have enjoyed it a little more.
yeah. So that's a part of me that's like, I don't know. I don't know what it is about kids these days, because like we liked it when we were little. So like something about it held up at least until then. I don't know if it's like the way that animation has evolved or the way that plots move these days. Because like it's a short movie. So that's the thing is like kids' movies are now like 2.5 hours long. So you have to have quite the attention span. It's so long. And like, but this movie is like an hour and 20 minutes, and if that, and like, well, if you don't count all the credits. So it definitely has those old credits, or like 20 minutes at the beginning, 20 minutes at the end. But like it's so short compared to like movies these days. So I'm just like, what is it about the plot that maybe is not like grabbing?
It's just so the storytelling is structured so differently than what the kids are being given these days. And I will say, obviously, because she's my favorite, I jump at any chance I can to play her. But she's just not like the unless I create the opportunity for myself. Like I threw a Wonderland tea party back in March. It was called March Madness, which is pretty cute. But unless I create the opportunity for myself to do that, people are not really booking Alice. I've done a couple. But the interest is just not there. But there is a show on Disney now. It's on Disney Plus. It's called Alice's Wonderland Bakery. And sometimes I play it on the TV. It's one of the kids shows where the voice acting is very like a lot of adults just can't stomach to hear it. But I'll play it on the TV while I'm doing something else. But it's Alice's like great granddaughter, but she looks just like Alice, and she lives in Wonderland. And she has this bakery and she like bakes things for her friend. And obviously they run into problems that they have to solve through the power of friendship. But they have reimagined the entire cast of Wonderland characters. Like the Queen of Hearts has a daughter who is like best friends with Alice. And then it's the Mad Hatter's grandson, and his name is Hattie. And like there's a white rabbit. So it has been the storytelling and the characters that are so, you know, near and dear to me have been recently reimagined into a more modern lens to try to get children these days interested in the story. And the kids that I have met as Alice, they love that. They know the movie, but they love this new Wonderland thing. And I think it's just the storytelling technique and like the format of the plot and the conflict and everything is just so different than what kids are being exposed to these days.
I agree with everything you said, Chloe. I think as to why some children are not super into it. The plot is just not as formulaic, I guess, as a lot of children's movies are. And I would even hesitate to say that this is a children's movie. I think I think it is in the sense of like the visuals and the animation and just like the funny storytelling. But I think like there's a deeper appreciation for it as you get older, and you can, I don't know, like not better understand it, but just have a grasp that like the plot isn't as like, you know, part 1, 2, and 3, and then like the through line is she has to get out of whatever. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit more topsy-turvy than that. And I think that's why it reminds me a lot of like Miyazaki films, especially Spirited Away. The entire time I was watching this, I was like, this feels like Spirited Away. And Spirited Away creeped me out as a child. So I think that's why I didn't watch Alice a lot as a kid, was because this gave me very similar vibes, but definitely not as hard on the eyes as Spirited Away is, because I don't like the way old people are animated. Anyway,
well, Spirited Away has a lot more. There's a lot more stakes too, because isn't the plot of that? It's been a long time since I've
just
seen
like
it, and I
save
think
her
last,
parents, right?
yeah, they
There's-
turned into
yeah, or they'll like
pigs.
disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like higher stakes in that one, whereas in Alice, she's kind of just having a fever dream. Like Spirited Away is like
her life is threatened at the end. They are going to decapitate
that's
her,
true.
but
That's
but
true.
yeah, overall, there's no like obstacle that she has to. There's no conflict that she really has to tackle. It's just kind of just like weird things
Going
are
through.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So Chloe, thank you for giving us like the synopsis and kind of your personal experience with it. With Alice in Wonderland and all her different iterations. But I'm curious to know then, like, what about Alice? What do you like about Alice? Like, what do you really love about this character? What does she mean for you? Yeah, everything.
That's it. It's like everything, but also nothing. And like, I don't know. I knew I was coming on this podcast and I tried to think about it. Some things are just so deeply ingrained in your very soul that like, I just
Sure.
can't, I can't really express to you. Like, it was just the one thing I can say, obviously I watched this film when I was very young and I fell in love with it right away. I was Alice in Wonderland for Halloween, like years and years and years in a row. It just has always been so special to me. And then I think when I hit puberty, which I mentioned earlier, you know, I got to middle school, you know, your brain starts changing and things like that. And I found a lot of solace in this story, I think, because at that point, you know, when I started maturing a little bit was when I reread the books, because, you know, I had the books read to me as a child, but that's even less, you know, it's even more convoluted when you're hearing it. And there's not
Yeah.
there are some illustrations, but you know, it's not as, you know, whatever. But when I turned maybe like 12 or 13, I started rereading the books. And I just found that I just had so much love for it, for the story itself for so long. And then when I started reading the books and learning more about, you know, the history of, you know, Lewis Carroll and why he wrote it, and, you know, all the things that went into making both of those different stories, I just found there was just so much to learn and so much more to love, and I just got so much more into it. And you know, when you're in middle school, you start high school, you know, you have, you know, if you're me, you're not really a social butterfly, and you find comfort in books and fictional characters and things like that. So it was just something that it just has always felt incredibly personal to me. And I literally can't explain why. Like that's the best I could give. It has just always felt very much a part of me. And like I said before, the lore and the world building is so deep and so vast, that there's just so much to love. I mean, it just makes me happy.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I have things like that in my life too, that like well, for me it's Harry Potter, which I'm trying to sort of separate myself from, obviously, because
Fair.
of reasons. But I understand that sort of like it's just kind of like it feels like it's a part of you, even though like it's truly something that just like you connected with when you were younger, but like it feels almost in a way like it defines you or like makes you who you are. And it's like,
Yes.
wow, I can't really explain this because it's just a book, but here we are, you know. So I get that. So LB, do you have reasons to like Alice?
I mean, as someone who's like super into inner child work and inner child healing, and someone who likes to talk about and promote and encourage people to tap into that childlike wonder and joy, I definitely think this is a good movie for that, because I think I mentioned this in a lot of our episodes. It is always nice to see a main character or a character that's a child just get to be a child, and that's definitely what this movie felt like. Was just like a really weird, crazy dream that a child would have, or just like a child playing make believe or pretend with their friends or something, and just coming up with these like really interesting stories, and like a child who has a very active imagination. So I did like that. I think Alice is just very cute and sweet and funny in that childlike way, like you were saying at the beginning, of how like in the quote unquote real world, she's talking about how she would prefer a world that's nonsensical and everything is opposite and nothing makes sense, and then she gets there and she's like, I need it to make sense.
Yeah.
But also in a lot of ways she just kind of goes with it. Like I think what one of the scenes that kind of stuck out to me, where it seemed like she was kind of going with the flow, was when she stumbles upon the Queen of Hearts castle, and she sees the cards painting and they're singing their song about painting the roses red. And when she joins into the conversation, she's also singing with them. Whereas I think before, in a couple of different interactions, if they're singing, like I think the Mad Hatter, um she just comes up and says like, oh hello, like a general greeting that a person would make, I suppose. And but when she sees these cards, she's like, she's had enough experience and understands the world a little bit as well as you can understand such a world, to where she's like, oh, if I sing, like that, this is the way to greet people, is by singing, not necessarily by like a proper introduction. So also pro cat, we love some pro cat characters. Dinah
Yeah.
is so freaking cute. Didn't know that was the cat's name until my most recent watch. She's adorable, and just like I don't want to say the perfect animation of a kitten, but when I think of an animated kitten, I think of that. So
She's so
yeah,
cute.
I
So
think
cute.
that was really cute. But I'm curious to hear from both of you, because apparently a lot of things went over my head. Maybe because I like, maybe if I watched it a second time, a lot of the lessons that she was supposed to learn would have hit me more. Because I think so much of it was me trying to uh dispel, what is it, like dispel belief and like really sink into the world, and I was like trying really hard to just also kind of go with the flow. But Alice did it a lot better than me, obviously. So I'm curious like what these lessons are that she's supposed to learn, and some of the themes that come up in the movie.
Yeah, well, I also want to say like something that something about Alice that I noticed on this watch that I don't think I've noticed before, even watching as an adult, whatever, is that like she's all alone this whole time. And
Yeah.
that is like really kind of sad and kind of like and I think she does a really good job of being alone, and like you said, she kind of goes with the flow and she's really good at like adapting to her surroundings and things like that. But it's curious
Yeah.
curious um to look in at like why she might be that way, because like her sister is obviously, at least in the animation, much older than she is. So like
Right.
are they very close? Does she have like a particularly lonely childhood? Is that why her active imagination is as active as it is? And why is she so good at adapting to these situations? Like is this perhaps a trauma response to like her childhood? And yes, she is very young, um but she has a lot of very mature things that she says. And like you said, you thought that she was older, but she says
Yeah.
all of those things like I should like when she does first see the bottle, and she says I better look first, and she examines the bottle before drinking it. She still drinks it, but she examines it first.
Yeah.
There's another part where she's saying something, I can't remember who it is or what. Okay, let me rewind. My mouth is going faster than my brain. There's a scene and I don't remember who she's talking to, but she says something, and then the character that she's talking to asks what she was saying, and she was like, oh, I was just giving myself some good advice. Like she says that a lot, like that she gives herself
Hmm.
good advice, and then later she's like sad and alone and can't figure out how to leave. And then she has her whole song about it where she's like, I give myself very good advice, but I very seldom follow it.
Follow it.
Yeah.
I did write that down as one of my favorite quotes because I was like, yeah, that is very relatable.
Yeah. And so like I think that those themes of thinking are very mature, especially for a 7-year-old. So that's just something I want to put into your head about like Alice as a character too. It's just
No,
like
that's a good point because I made a note, especially the interaction with the Queen of Hearts, because that's like the first, I think, female other than the flowers, but like that's, well, even with the flowers, they're very nitpicky of her, right? And so the Queen of Hearts is also very nitpicky and telling her to like stand up straight or do this, do that, be very proper, which to me felt like kind of a subconscious maybe indication of how she perceives older women, maybe. So like with her older sister, because I mean the main interaction we see with her older sisters, her being like, pay attention to your lessons, like, just stop being a kid. Essentially, I guess if we boiled it down, was her being like, stop being distracted. Also like ADH representation maybe a little bit, where she's
I
like,
thought so too. Yeah.
she's like making a flower crown while her sister is trying to read her a lesson. And I'm like, I'm the same way. Can't just sit still and pay attention. Got to be doing something with my hands. So like, I really appreciated that. But no, I do see what you're saying. And Chloe, I'm very interested to hear what you say. But I do think um a lot of interactions she has represents, like you said, Heather, a coping mechanism or something like subconscious that for whatever reason I could not pick up on. So like I did write down though, like, what does the white rabbit represent? Like what's that all
Yeah.
about? But then also like it could be that it doesn't really represent anything other than just like, childlike whimsy and wonder and imagination. But anyway, yeah, Chloe, go ahead.
I completely, everything that the both of you just said is totally valid and completely very intelligent interpretations from, from this specific film. I personally don't think it represents anything. And I think that's maybe what I like about it. I think, and like I said, I do like both of what you guys just said is totally valid, and I completely respect that, and I think they're very analytical and intelligent responses. I personally just choose to think it's nothing. Like, if you look at it, and I also think looking at it in the context of just this film, like I know too much. I know too much
Fair.
about why this book was written and what Lewis Carroll was up to at the time and who these people were in real life. Um, but if you're looking at it through the lens of just this specific, the 1951, it very much is like Alice's dreamland, and it makes sense that you would interpret that, all these figures are, dream interpretations of the people that she, interacts with on a daily basis. I think it's just silly and fun. I think it's kind of odd to imagine a world on your own and then show up and everyone is mean to you. I think it's like if she had any sort of conscious or subconscious input on, on formulating this world around her,
Yeah.
you would think she would have a little bit of a better time. Um, and because of that, it makes sense too that you would get that it's like a trauma response because she shows up and everyone is mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I really don't think and I'm sorry this is not as like I don't have much to say other than I think it's just imaginative. I think it's just fun and whimsical. Um yeah, when Lewis Carroll wrote the book, it was about his friend's daughter which again, super weird, but he would like there was like two of them and he would like hang out with them at their like summer home while he was like writing, and the girls would want him to tell them stories, and Alice was the younger daughter, and he would tell them these crazy stories. And he also suffered from migraines, which is kind of funny because I also suffered from migraines, and it's said that a lot of like the changing of size and scaling things is, you sometimes experience that kind of feeling when you're having a migraine, and that's where a lot of that came from. So I think Lewis Carroll was just a weird dude, and I think it was just supposed to be this magical land for this little girl that he hung out with to like, explore. I don't, that's my takeaway. I don't know. I'm sorry. I just think it's just,
Yeah.
That's
No.
what I got.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
So then I'm curious, like if we were to look kind of like zoom out and look at it from all of like the knowledge that you have accumulated over time about this, what do the other who are the other characters based on from Lewis Carroll's life?
I don't know. I don't know if any of them are real life
Oh, I see.
people that happen. Alice was a real girl that Lewis Carroll had. He like
A friendship with
a friendship,
question
but
mark.
they weren't like friends. It was like they were his friends' kids, and like he went to their summer home to work on his writing, and the kids would be outside playing, and he would be like interacting with them. I don't think it's as weird as a lot of people think it is, but it's still definitely not. I don't know. What was the question? Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Who
No,
are the
you
other
answered it because
characters? Okay,
yeah, I
yeah.
was just wondering if the other characters represented anyone else from Lewis Carroll's life.
I think it's not too far off to assume that a lot of the other characters in like the Wonderland universe are people that they would have interacted with. Because there's a lot of them that are concerned with teaching lessons and
Mm-hmm.
recitation, which is something that kids learned in school quite a bit. So it's like maybe Alice and her sister might have complained about that to Lewis Carroll and having to do these things, and that's where he got the inspiration for some of these characters. Like, there's also the mock turtle who doesn't show up in the cartoon but is in a couple of the other adaptations, who is also concerned with making them recite songs and poetry and things like that. And poetry is a theme that happens quite a bit in the books, and the original text, the original poems from the book actually are make up a lot of the dialogue in the cartoon as well, which is something that I quite like a lot. But yeah, I don't think it's too far off to assume that a lot of the Wonderland characters are characters that they probably would have interacted with in real life. Like there's a lot of conclusions you can, or like comparisons you can draw from looking at the characters individually, but none that I
Yeah.
know of. Full
Yeah.
stop. Sorry. Yeah.
Interesting. No, that makes sense. Thank you. No, thank you for your input. I mean, that's why we have you on the podcast and why we're here talking about it is because we like to get all of the different perspectives, like especially from someone who has grown up with it, loved it since childhood. Like I think it's is a really good and valuable perspective to have. And then I feel like I'm over here like, I don't know. And then Heather, I am curious then like what lessons and themes you picked up on because you mentioned that each interaction is kind of like a lesson that she has to learn to kind of progress. Like because okay, sorry, let me back up too. A lot of it too reminded me of like weird video game interactions, especially the Mad Hatter, because
Yes.
they like she shows up and it's the same frame as when she's leaving and turns around and they're back to like where they had been when she saw them. And so I was like, that's so weird. So yeah, that's what that reminded me of, where sometimes in video games you have to meet certain people in a certain order in order to get through, to the
Yeah.
end. And so that's kind of what it felt like to me. But anyway, so yeah, Heather, I'm curious what lessons, themes you picked up on.
Yeah, there's definitely the theme of curiosity all throughout of like, what does it mean to be curious and follow your curiosity? Is it healthy? Is it safe? Is being curious a good thing or is it a bad thing? And I think obviously what we talk about on this podcast all the time is that it's neither. Like there is a lot
Both
of black
and
and white
yeah.
here. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of gray area here that it's not good or bad. I think that there are tipping the scales to where it can be bad, tipping the scales to where it can be good to follow your curiosity. And so it's like her curiosity led her here to this world, but then gets her into ultimately a situation where they're going to chop off her head. So like that, and that was like foreshadowed by the story of the oysters that Tweedledee and Tweedledum told her at the very beginning of the story. So it's like I just think that there are little moments of time, little pockets throughout the adventure where she's being told these things, and some of them are nonsense, but some of them are like signs as to like, well, let's just take a step back and see let's figure out what this actually means. It's almost like each character she interacts with is like a little warning sign or a little stop sign, or maybe a yield sign, right? And she continues to choose to sort of like push past the yield, right? And so that's kind of how I look at it. So Tweedledee and Tweedledum interaction definitely focused on like curiosity. The interaction with the caterpillar is focused on temper. I don't remember this as a kid, but he obviously was very like angry, a very angry caterpillar. And so like and so that lesson was sort of about like controlling your temper and like and which I think like as a woman being told that by a man, anyway. Excuse me. Um when he's the one who had the temper, I think that was like a really kind of like
A
funny
little
sort
too
of like,
real.
yeah, it's just like a look at like, well, he's the one who obviously has a temper, so like relax. And so like there's just like, again, it's just like these little yield points. I don't have any of this written down, so I'm just like pulling from my mind of like
Yeah.
what moments are sort of like stepping stones or learning. I think there's the moment when she's completely alone. The little dog that's a broom has come and swept away all the paths. She's absolutely by herself. And I think that's the sort of like reflection time where she does, that's the song where she says, I give myself very good advice, but I very seldom follow it. And that was sort of her realizing like, oh, with all of these interactions, with all of this cast of, this cast of characters, like I have, where has it gotten me? I've wound up here. And I didn't listen. Not only did I not listen to them, but I also didn't listen to myself. And that's when she sort of like gains empathy for the first time from anyone in Wonderland. Like all the like little umbrella vultures and little fuzzy things come out and they're like crying because her song is so sad about how alone she is. Um and so I think like that is a moment of her sort of like reflecting and learning like, okay, well, I can get myself out of this. Like I have the capability to do. However, then the Cheshire Cat gives her bad advice and and she ends up with the Queen of Hearts. So I just think in terms of specific lessons, my brain is not thinking of them, but I do think that each interaction is a moment of learning for her. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you explaining that when she's alone crying to herself is like her like that moment of empowerment where I think that's kind of like the turning point, I think, when she's gone up until that point just kind of letting things happen to her or like expecting someone else to tell her how to navigate all of this, but then she has that moment where she's like, oh, the only person that can get me out of this is me, and I've also gotten myself here. And I know this is like Chloe, you were saying, this is a very like analytical, intelligent, mature way of thinking about this, but I think if I were to dig a little deep and kind of pull some relate it to a like healing journey or a mental health journey, I think it's very important that when we're on this journey to take accountability for the ways in which we have gotten ourselves to this situation and the ways that we contributed to some of the things. That's not to like victim blame or anything like that, but self like I think so much of what we get on social media, especially with like pop psychology and how psychology is presented on social media, it's always like it's everyone else's fault. Like it's your narcissistic parent or your abusive ex or blah 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 blah. And yes, those things are totally valid and true. And we also have to take accountability for the ways in which our unresolved trauma has impacted us and the people around us and things like that. So anyway, I think a lot of people can get to that point where they realize like, oh, I've repeated these cycles or these behaviors and patterns, and the only way they're going to stop is if I do something about it and then move forward from there.
Yeah.
And I think very similarly, it takes a moment of kind of breaking down and crying and feeling really down and hard on ourselves before we can kind of like pick ourselves up from our bootstraps and be like, no, like, okay, I've not, I don't want to say wallowing, but like, I've cried it. I've cried it out. And that's a totally valid response to release some energy. And now I get to decide how I want to move forward about it. So there we go. That's my my
I got you
takeaway.
there.
That
Yeah,
did
thank
remind
you.
me of one other actual like real life actual lesson that
Yeah.
I do think about quite a bit to this day throughout my adult life, is that you can't fight madness with reason, which is something that I have experienced, with employers, with friends, with family members, if someone is just, if their way of thinking is just so far removed from reality and logic, you cannot logic them to reason with you. You know, and I'm not going to call anyone out on the internet, but sometimes it's like some people really just seem like they are in Wonderland. Like sometimes talking to them, you're like, are like, you feel like you just cannot, your realities are so different, and your logic and your reasoning is so far off from one another. There's just no way that you can communicate with people
Yeah.
in those kinds of situations, and you can't be mad at yourself for just for not being able to get through to them, because sometimes it's just the levels just don't connect. If that makes sense. Like you can't fight madness with reason. And at that point you have to either decide, you know, to walk away, or I don't know, I'm not going to say fight madness with madness, because that's not, you know what I'm trying to say though. Like you have to, at some
Yeah.
point you have to realize that you cannot get through to some people, and sometimes it's up to, like, you know, no matter how much healing or self, you know, inner work or growth that you have done, you cannot get through to certain people until they also do that kind of work as well. And if you're just not
Yeah.
on the same levels, there's no point in trying to
Totally.
force communication.
What
Yeah.
you're reminding me of is like dealing kind of with like a gaslighter, like someone who's purposely trying to manipulate the situation, the conversation, and you.
Yeah.
And I think what I really like what you're saying, that you can't fight that with reason because they are not being reasonable.
Right.
And it's not that you have to get on their level or that you need to convince them to get on your level. It's that like you stand your ground, like, yeah, you stand your ground and stay on topic and just stand firm in your truth and your reality. And if they don't want to see it or agree with you, that's not your fault. And it's not your
Exactly.
job to convince them otherwise. You just got to stand firm and also be okay with them not believing you. And it's like it's one of the most uncomfortable and hard things we have to do as we're recovering from those kinds of situations. But I think there's a lot of peace and power in just standing firm in reason when everyone else is mad. So
Yeah.
I like that you said that. Yeah.
We definitely, like, if you want to compare like who is the gaslighter in this, like Cheshire Cat is 100%. He goes like, he went that way, and then and then like
and he's
later
like, no,
Alice
this
is like,
way. What are you talking about? What
yeah,
are you talking about?
yeah, he very like, he turns her around and all sorts of stuff, and like, and definitely does the whole like no, you're the one who said that. What are you yeah.
Yeah.
But
Or
this
like when he
also
keeps
reminds
disappearing
me,
around the oh sorry, I was just gonna say when he keeps disappearing around the queen. So she's like, the cat's there, and he's like,
Yeah.
ha ha ha, no, I'm not. And she gets like mad at Alice. So
Yeah.
yeah. But what it also reminds me of, to separate from gaslighting, the you can't fight madness with reason is like, also when it comes to like political opinions. I have a friend just texted me yesterday who was like, please tell me not to get in a fight with this person on the internet, because like you just, like, people are going to believe what they believe, and you cannot, like, you cannot change their mind, especially if their reality is so far different, far removed from your reality. It's not necessarily that they're crazy or that it's just that they believe something so different from what you believe in that nothing you can say is going to change their opinion.
Exactly.
Totally.
And that's what that reminded me of too, because it was like, I used to get in fights all the time with people, and all that caused me was anxiety. I was like,
yeah.
I hate this so much. And it's like, I'm not going to change anyone's mind though. I
Although
do
what
have
I
one
will
person.
say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I do have one person who I kind of like, but this was, again, I used like a very close to home example and was like, if this happened to this person, that person, like, this person could be dead right now, basically. I'm not going to go into all the politics of everything.
Mhm.
But basically I like explained it very, very close to home to this person, and it opened their eyes a little bit. So yeah, that was like the closest I've gotten to changing someone's mind, was being like, yeah, but how about you think of it like this person who's very, very close to me and you, and this
You have to
happening
make
to
it
them.
super personal.
Yeah.
One, it sucks that that's somehow the only way people understand, especially with like women's rights, and talking to men about it and being like, well, what if this happened to your mom or sister or daughter? And it's like, why do we have to personalize a person who already is a person, you know, for it to make sense. But what I was gonna say too, on to your point, especially about like the political stuff, and I'm not gonna name specific events happening in the world right now, but as someone who grew up in certain spaces, I was very indoctrinated in a certain perspective or worldview of a certain part of the world, and it was having conversations or seeing things on the internet that planted the seed of changing that perspective and worldview. And I also think a little bit on my part of like keeping an open mind after I realized that the world is not as black and white as this certain indoctrination would want me to believe. So just to your point about like nothing you can say, like, yes, I think in the moment, know when it's time to walk away or when it's time to reserve your energy. But also, even if you can't convince them in that moment, I think even just planting the seed that like of keeping an open mind, or like this is not the one and right way of thinking about these things, can also be very valuable. Yeah.
What a tangent. I love it. I had a thought, and I think that this is how I'm relating it to like maybe a fitness journey, or a body image journey. But I think it also can be related in a mental health journey as well. So Marissa, feel free to like chime in as I talk about this. Well, first I'll talk about body image and then I'll get to it. I thought something that was interesting specifically about the scene with the flowers, which I think is like an iconic scene. I remember that from childhood. I think I was afraid of the purple one with the glasses, like that she is the most judgmental. And I was like, if every person who's ever judged me is that purple flower. Anyway, so it gave me, it's kind of funny that we're getting to like, we were talking about politics and then we got here, but like what it reminded me of is like the mob mentality of like one person deciding that someone is othered. Like just one of those flowers was like, she's a weed, and then they were all like, get her out of here. And like this very like, I thought that was it, like reminded me both of like Mean Girls in high school, but also like the mob mentality of like once society or one person or someone with power decides that someone is othered, they get shunned. And I thought that was like really sad. So I wanted to make that point.
I don't know if you remember, but the Rosebud pops his little head out and he's like, I think she's pretty. She goes,
yes,
puts him away.
Yeah.
And the rest of them are like, oh my God, oh wait, yeah, her stems, oh, her petals, oh, she smells, where do you come from? And it all just piles. That's really, yes.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit more about sort of like overall. But my view of Alice in Wonderland, kind of like as a metaphor, is what it feels like to go through a fitness journey alone. You get a lot of nonsense. You get a lot of people telling you like, this is what you should do. No, this is what you should do. And then you start reading labels and you start looking up words that you don't understand, and none of it makes sense. And then you get to a point where you're like sitting alone and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm scared. And you've got influencers telling you one thing and you've got other people telling you another. Like, I'll give an example because I just talked about this, but it's like the influencers on the internet who are trying to convince you to buy their supplements, right? But on the same influencer also saying like, do not eat frozen or canned vegetables. It's like, okay, but your supplements are clearly like not natural, like from the earth, like whatever, and I can't have. So it's like it's all this like mixed messaging, nonsensical, and when you're trying to go it alone, it really does feel like a bunch of nonsense. But then when you have like, well, first of all, you have to figure out what you want. I think the whole time Alice had no idea what she wanted. She was just like, I was curious. I followed my interest and then I ended up here. And that's like, if that's not a fitness journey, I don't know what it is. It's like, I am curious. I started and now I'm very overwhelmed and have no idea what I'm doing, right? Especially if you're alone. So it's kind of like you have to hone in on your why. Why am I doing this? What do I want? And how can I get those things? And I think that's like one thing that Alice never really had throughout the movie, is like she never had a why, a what, a where, a how. Like she didn't have a lot of those. And so it was very hard for her to then eventually get home because her goal was non-existent, right? or how she was going to get there was non-existent either. It was just listening to all of the nonsense. So the way that I can like take that metaphor and bring it close to home is basically say that like when you have other people, like you figure out your why, figure that out first, figure out your why, figure out your what, figure out your how, and then find people who align with that, right? Because there's a lot of mixed information, a lot of that nonsense on the internet, everywhere around you, in the gym, pretty much no matter where you look. And so it's like you have to figure out what you believe and what your goals are, and the type of fitness journey that you want to have. And then you can move forward from there and gather the people and the tools that are going to support that journey, right? So like I might not be the fitness person for you because I have a very mine is a more body neutral, sort of like body positive approach to fitness. So I don't do measurements, I don't do before and afters, I don't do those kinds of things. And for people who have a very, very specific goal in mind, I might not work for them because that's my approach to it. Or with the structure of Geeknasium, for example, is like my Geeknasium is structured so that you can do any of like 100 workouts that you want to do. You can pick from any fandom, anything, and it makes it fun. But for some people, it might be overwhelming because then there are too many options, right? So that's just kind of my equating the nonsense of starting a fitness journey to kind of equating the plot or the story of Alice in Wonderland to how it might feel to go through something completely alone. So, but also like doing anything alone. It's not just fitness, right? Like any new adventure that you want to try, if you try to do it alone, there's going to be a lot of nonsense
without having that who, what, where, when, why that you were just mentioning. Because
Yeah.
only what was just not here.
Yeah.
Whatever is not this situation, whatever is not that. And that's
whatever is not that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think especially because on similar to a fitness journey, I think you can only do so much on or with other people on a mental health journey. Like I think it's really important to reiterate that like a therapist can't heal you, the meds aren't going to necessarily heal you, a coach isn't going to heal you, no one can heal you except yourself. Like all of these resources and supports and tools can be helpful, but they're not going to do the work. Like I think a big misconception especially with therapy is that like the therapist is going to fix your life, or those sessions are supposed to fix your life. And if you're not having big breakthroughs every session, then there's something wrong, whether with the therapist or with you. And that's not true. It's just that there is oftentimes there is work that needs to be done in between those sessions. The work is outside of those sessions. The sessions are a great place to practice, I think, when you're feeling safe and regulated, but it's in those moments when you're activated or triggered or something is happening where you take all of that practice and you're kind of on your own doing it. I think it's always great to have a support system and to reach out for help when you need it. But they don't call it a self-healing journey for nothing. It really is just like you having to identify, find, and embrace like your own power to get through it. And like I said before, I think Alice's that scene when she's all alone is a very similar experience a lot of people go through on their mental health recovery, personal development, and growth journeys. So yeah, I think the other thing too that came to mind was what you were saying, Heather, about how she kind of looks to everyone else to tell her like where to go, how to get out of there, what to do, how to find the white rabbit. And then eventually it's like she gets to this point of realizing that, and this is not exactly relatable or true for real life, but those people, those characters were not really trying to help her. They kind of had their own agenda or were just being very silly. But I think equating that to the real life, a lot of people can share their experience. I think when I first started my business and being more public about my journey on social media, a lot of people were like, well, what did you do? How did you get over it? And it's like, these are the things that worked for me, but my disclaimer, and I will always say it, is like what worked for me may not work for you. And I only found the things that worked because I tried. Like you just kind of have to do a lot of trial and error, and it sucks because I think we live in a society and a culture that wants instant gratification and fast results. And it's this mentality of like how quickly, especially like with fitness, right? Like how quickly can I get from where I am now to my desired weight or to my desired body shape or whatever. And it's not always that easy or simple. And that isn't that's not your fault. It just means that you're on your own journey, timeline, path, and you can't really rush it. You just kind of, like Alice, go with the flow in some situations. So that's why I'm really glad we had this conversation. I went from being like, I don't know, so here we go. I got it now.
Yeah.
Off the cuff, just like
Off.
that.
We got there. We worked it out. We got there.
We got there. Yeah. And then also, Chloe, to your point, I do think that not everything has to have a very deep meaning. That is what we do on this podcast, but that's okay. But I agree that I think a lot of the movie is just to sit back and enjoy it and just go along for the ride, because I think oftentimes a lot of especially with a lot of like new movies where there is a deeper meaning, it's not as enjoyable because it's just like lingering in the background of your mind, you know. But I think if you want this movie to like just be your safe space where you can let go of all those things, that's great too.
Yeah, and like I said, everything that we have talked about here is very, very intelligent, very valid interpretations and analyses, and I do like completely respect that. I am just way too invested. I just, you know, like it's just too, I know too much, and I just think it's just it's just meant to entertain a kid. And like I said, when, you know, like we were talking about earlier, comparing the methods of storytelling when this was written and when this animation was created to now, you know, a lot of it is like, you know, when you think about the trajectory of the princesses specifically, you start out with Cinderella, who, you know, just wanted to have a good time, and then she got her prince, and then happily ever after. And then Jasmine and Mulan started coming along, and they had agenda, and they had things they wanted to do. And now there's Anna and Elsa, who have themes of sisterhood and family and regret and history and things like that. And it's just, you know, it might have just been, I'm going to tell you a silly little story, and I hope it makes you laugh, and I hope it makes you think about your school teacher, and, you know, and it's just silly and fun sometimes. But again, I completely respect every single, you know, and agree with you guys too.
Yeah, no, you are good. You're good. That's why, like I said, that's why we have you, because we like to get all of the different perspectives. Heather and I are Libras, so we're all about that balance. And yeah. Before we wrap up, Chloe, is it safe to say that Alice is your favorite character from the movie?
I don't know where you would get that from.
I have no idea.
But yes, yeah.
Do you have a favorite quote?
I mean, the advice one is very good. Hold on, come ask HB, and I'll hold on. I'm going to utilize Google here.
Okay,
do it. Well, I have a fun fact. It's not a fun fact. If you watch the movie, you heard it, but the Cheshire Cat says most everyone's mad here, but when people quote Alice in Wonderland, they say we're all mad here. So I think that's interesting because he says most everyone's mad here, not we're all mad here.
I wonder if the we're all mad here is from the books. Chloe, please verify.
I cannot neither confirm nor deny, but I have a feeling that that's also might be where that comes from. Because
or it could just be one of those.
Sorry, you've all been in somebody's college freshman dorm room where they have that poster. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Or the tattoos. So many tattoos. Like we're all mad here. And
I know he says that in the live action.
Yeah. I also wonder if it's one of those things where kind of like in Star Wars where everyone thinks Vader says like, Luke, I am your father, but that's not actually the line. So I wonder if it's just one of those things where over the course of however many years and not having like instantaneous rewatches and being able to quote it, it just became one of those like misquoted lines. But I mean, it's still a good one.
Sorry, I found a quote I was thinking of.
Good.
Go for it.
Oh, it's when she's talking to the flowers, and she says, "That's nonsense. Flowers can't talk." And they say, "Of course we could talk if there's anyone worth talking to or about." Ha ha ha.
That one's good.
Which is not deep or philosophical in any way. I just think it's cute.
No, that line did make me laugh because I thought it was very funny. Very
so
on
many
theme
good
for
ones,
the
though.
flowers.
No, I just found this must be like an adaptation. It says adapted by Jane Carruth, original story by Lewis Carroll. So in her adaptation of the story, it says, how do you know I'm mad? Oh, wait, no. But I don't want to go among mad people, Alice remarked. Oh, you can't help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad, you're mad. How do you know I'm mad, said Alice. You must be, or you wouldn't have come here. So apparently that's in an adaptation.
Interesting.
But I think in the book, I can't find any other quote of "We're all mad here" except for that one in the book. Another fun thing, another fun quote that's from the book that I don't think was in the movie is why sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. I like that a lot.
They used that in the blasted live action. They used it.
I do think I think I heard that in that one, yeah, but not in this one. Yeah.
That does sound familiar.
I had a lot of quotes that I really liked. I thought that the whole interaction with the doorknob, even though it scared me as a child, I thought it was very quick-witted. There's a lot of very back and forth, like very funny things that are said. And like he says, one good turn deserves another, which I thought was amazing.
Get it?
And then
doorknob turn. He like cracks himself up. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So funny.
And then there's the impassable. And then she's like, "What? Do you mean impossible?" And he's like, "No, impassable. Nothing's impossible."
Nothing's impossible.
I
like that one a lot too. Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah. What about you? Did you say yours? I'm sorry if you did. I was Googling things.
No, it's okay. I have not. Mine is actually, so I have a few as well. The first one is when Alice is complaining about her sister's history lesson, and she's like, "Why would I want to read it? There's no pictures in that book." And the sister says something like, "There are many a good book in this world without pictures in it." And I just like that one because I love reading. For the people watching on YouTube, as you can see my haphazard bookshelves behind me. So I really liked that quote. And then just the relatable ones like, "Oh dear, I do wish I hadn't cried so much."
Yeah. I think about that one quite a bit.
Oh, that one's so funny. And then also just I give myself very good advice, but I very seldom follow it.
Oh, that's right before the caucus race part. I don't know if you guys caught that. But that's in the book and in the cartoon as well, where she's done crying and she comes across the dodo and they're like, "Well, let's have a caucus race," and all they do is just like run around in circles, and there's no real end in sight to it. So that's like a kind of funny little political allegory there. But
I did not catch that. That is very funny.
There's another quote I wanted to say that I liked. When Alice is asking which way, and the Cheshire Cat is like, "That depends on where you want to go." And I thought that was, she literally just asks him like, "Which way?" And he's like you gotta give me something.
Yeah. Like, we need your input too. Anything else before we wrap up?
Just that I hate the live action with my entire body and soul. That's it.
Is there a particular reason?
Because it sucks. He strayed so far from the original content, and I think is my main problem with it. I love Tim Burton. Obviously, I love this story. I was so excited when I heard about it. But what I like about, I think we were talking about the 1999 version earlier. I don't know if it's that one or the 1991 where Martin Short is the Mad Hatter. It was like a made-for-TV special, but that's another one of my favorite adaptations. But a lot of them try to stay very true to the source material, and Tim Burton was like, "I'm just gonna like loosely take this idea and make it my own," and that pissed me off really bad. I will say the soundtrack for the live action, there are some bangers on there, some pretty good music on the soundtrack, but he just, in my opinion, bastardized the story, and the second one was even farther from the original content. I
didn't even know there was a second one.
Yeah. I had to see it, I'm not gonna not see it, but
yeah, I completely forgot or like just didn't remember that there's music even in this.
It's like Avril Lavigne, Plain White Tees, like 2010 Me was super into it. It's like modern artists of that time. Of that time.
That's so
Oh my
funny.
god.
Of that
Yeah.
time. I know.
Yeah.
Oh, it hurts. No,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I kind of want to rewatch it just because. But I haven't seen it in a really, really long time. And I don't really like that though when it's more of a story like inspired by the characters but has nothing to do with the original story, because it's like, then why even, like, what are you doing? I think because this is a huge tangent, and HB, feel free to like cut this out, but the new Lord of the Rings
The Rings of
show,
Power. Yeah.
Ring of Power or whatever, isn't that
Yeah.
kind of the same, where like they didn't get the rights to actually do anything, they just got like rights to the characters' names or something, and
Something like that. Yeah.
they like made up a whole backstory for Galadriel that has nothing to do with the actual backstory that has been written and is published and is like,
Yep.
oh god. Anyway.
No, that's yes. Same thing. Same thing.
Yeah.
And it
Not a
wasn't even like creepy in a cute way. Like lots of Burton is
No.
creepy cute. It was just like creepy, gross, weird. Like I don't know if you remember the way the Tweedles looked, or just like I don't know, just the designs were not hitting for me. The fact that Alice was like a fully grown adult did not hit for me. We don't acknowledge the live action in this household. It doesn't exist.
That's how I feel about the Mulan live action. So anyway.
Maybe that will be how I feel about the Moana live action. No, I'm just kidding.
I completely forgot they're doing a live action. Like, let's just stop. There are so many things
too. Like it's too many.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Zachary Levi was like, I would love to come back and play Flynn Rat. Like, dude, you're like 50. You're not.
Yeah.
Zachary
like,
Levi, give it up.
He could be the king. I think that'd be really cute.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah,
I think if like he and Mandy Moore came back as the king and queen. But like,
that is a cute idea, actually. Take it or leave it, Zachary Levi. This is your offer.
Yeah.
That's what you're getting.
I'm just tired of live actions because like, so sorry, another tangent. I love Ahsoka. The show was fine. It was great. I don't really have any major complaints, but going from Clone Wars and Rebels to the lightsaber sequences we're getting in the live actions, I'm like, they just don't hit. This is why it works so much better as a animated, because you can do so much more with which is why we were talking about Into the Spider-Verse earlier. I think that's why I love all of those Spider-Verse movies, is because the action sequences just hit in a very different way that live actions cannot capture. Even with CGI, because CGI is shit now. It just doesn't hit.
Yep.
Anyway.
Absolutely.
Huge side tangent. Thank you, Chloe, for coming on again. I'm very happy to have had you. Thank you for both of you. Thank you to both of you for helping me kind of get to my own. What am I trying to say? Thanks to both of you for walking me down my own path so that I could find those takeaways and messages and things. And I think we had a really great conversation, diving a little deep, even though on one end it could just be a fun little story. And then I think if, like we say in a lot of episodes, if it resonates with you in some kind of way, in those ways, totally fine. Both, like you said, both are valid. And this was great. Now I think I have a deeper appreciation and like for this movie, so I think I'm gonna rewatch it again at some point, and also just like dispel all of the trying to find meanings and just like sit back and enjoy it. And maybe try it again a little more sober. I don't know.
I encourage you to check out the text too, if you're able to. The original text, the books. Very, very fun.
I'm super down. Who knows? Maybe I'll end up with like 20 copies like you, because
I've always wanted to read them. I think I actually have a copy of one and I've just never picked it up.
You should.
Yeah.
You definitely should.
Yeah. There we go. That's our homework for our winter break, HB. We're going to come back next season, have Chloe on, and we'll tell her all about
There's
the
going
book.
to be a quiz.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. HB, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, all good.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for allowing me to nerd out about my favorite thing in the world. It means so much. I learned from you guys. I hope I could teach you guys some stuff too.
Heck
and just have it. This opportunity is so special. I love you guys. I love talking to you. I think we have some really great conversations. And again, getting the chance to just info dump about my most favorite thing is really special. So I appreciate that.
Honestly, that's why we're here. We're two nerds
literally
that also love to info dump. Like,
and also literally why I asked you specifically for it to be on this episode. Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty.
And
Thanks,
if
Chloe.
you guys want to, I was just gonna say, if you guys want to find Chloe anywhere, it'll be in the show notes as well. Information about Fantasy First and also her Instagram where she posts all the cosplay stuffies. So,
Yay!
Yay!
Thank you so much.
Yay! All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Multiverse podcast and for spending time with us, HB and LB. Special shout out to our musical composer, Little HB.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, leave a rating and review, or become an exclusive Patreon member to see bonus and additional content.
To stay up to date on all things MHM, you can follow us on Instagram at Heather Bodie and at littlebent_notbroken, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our faces and watch some fun bloopers. You can find all of these links in the show notes.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.